Chapter 1. The Frozen Death. The wind screamed across the tundra, carving through the endless white like a ghostly wail. The cold was a living thing, wrapping around Daniel Harlow as he struggled to maneuver his snowmobile through the worsening blizzard. His fuel gauge flickered on empty. He had pushed too far, too fast, and now he was paying the price. The outpost of Wolf's Hollow was barely visible in the distance, just a handful of dark shapes against the blinding snow. A small, forgotten town in the frozen reaches of the Yukon, home to less than 50 people. He had been there for 3 months, tracking dwindling caribou herds, but something was wrong. The animals were acting strange, disappearing, running from something unseen, and then the bodies started turning up. A shout tore through the wind. At first, Daniel thought it was just the howling storm, but then he saw it. A man stumbling through the snow, waving frantically. Daniel veered his snowmobile toward him, skidding to a stop. The man collapsed, gasping, his face pale, his breath fogging rapidly in the cold. "Help me," he rasped. Daniel jumped off the snowmobile, kneeling beside him. "What happened?" The man's lips trembled. "It's still out there, watching." Daniel frowned. "What is?" And then he noticed the man's throat, a deep wound, 2 perfect punctures. Daniel's stomach twisted. No animal did this. It looked like something had drained him. The man's eyes fluttered. "Don't let it in the town." And then he was gone. The wind swallowed his last breath, and in the darkness beyond, something moved. Chapter 2. Wolf's Hollow. By the time Daniel dragged the man's frozen corpse into Wolf's Hollow, the town had already shut itself in. The blizzard had locked people indoors, but there was something more than that. The place had the feel of a town in mourning, quiet, watchful, like something was waiting just outside. He burst into the only tavern, slamming the door behind him. A handful of locals sat around the fire, their faces lined with exhaustion. "Found someone outside," Daniel announced, shoving the frozen body onto the floor. "He was dying, said something was out there." Silence. The bartender, a burly man named Jonas Fisk, exchanged glances with the others. He sighed. "We know." Daniel's brow furrowed. "Know what?" Jonas stood. "That thing has been picking us off one by one." Daniel's pulse quickened. "What thing?" Jonas hesitated, then muttered, "A vampire." Daniel scoffed. "You can't be serious." An elderly woman near the fire lifted her head. Her voice was quiet but firm. "You saw the wounds, didn't you?" Daniel swallowed. He had. And deep down, something in his bones told him the old woman was right. Chapter 3. The Hunter in the Snow. Jonas poured Daniel a stiff drink and explained. "The legends go back hundreds of years," he said. "An old curse buried in the ice, something that feeds on blood, that walks in the storm. The Inuit called it Tupilak, a hunter that never dies." Daniel exhaled. "And you believe this?" Jonas gave him a hard look. "You just dragged in a man with his throat ripped open, son. Tell me what you think did that." Daniel opened his mouth, but then the lamps flickered, the fire dimmed, and the wind stopped. For a brief, terrifying moment, there was absolute silence. Then, a loud, deliberate knock at the door. 3 times, slow, heavy. Jonas went pale. One of the men whispered, "It's here." The knocking came again. Daniel moved toward the door, but Jonas grabbed his wrist. "Don't," he hissed. Daniel's breath came fast. He looked at the others, terrified, frozen. Something was waiting outside. Then the whispering began. A voice, soft as the wind. Let me in. Daniel's heart hammered. He looked toward the frosted window, and his breath caught in his throat. A face stared back at him, pale, hollow. Its eyes were pits of black hunger. The whispering grew louder. Daniel stumbled back. Jonas snuffed the lamps, plunging the tavern into darkness. The whispering stopped, and the thing outside vanished. Chapter 4. The Last Stand. They didn't sleep. They knew the vampire would return, and next time it wouldn't ask to be let in. Jonas had a plan. We trap it, he said. Lure it into the old ice cellar and bury it under the frost. Daniel clenched his fists. And if that doesn't work? Jonas's eyes darkened. Then we die. They prepared at dawn, salted the doors, silver knives, crosses, anything the old stories claimed could hurt it. Daniel wasn't sure if any of it would work, but he had seen its face, and he knew it was real. Night fell, and then the screams began. Daniel ran outside, just in time to see the vampire strike. It moved too fast, a blur against the snow. It slammed one of the townspeople into the ground, its mouth opening, fangs glistening. Daniel raised his rifle. Boom! The vampire barely flinched. It turned to him, and it smiled. Daniel ran. The town fell into chaos. People fled. Doors slammed. But the vampire was everywhere at once. It hunted in the storm, unseen, silent. Jonas screamed, "To the cellar!" They sprinted for the old storage cellar at the edge of town, a deep pit carved into the permafrost. Their only chance. Daniel turned. The vampire was coming. Faster, faster. Then they reached the pit. Daniel jumped aside at the last moment. The vampire plunged forward and fell straight into the ice. Jonas pulled the detonator. A deafening boom. The ice collapsed, burying the monster beneath tons of frozen stone. For a moment, there was only silence. Then Jonas whispered, "It's done." But Daniel wasn't sure, because deep beneath the ice, something still moved. Epilogue. The ice never forgets. They left Wolf's Hollow the next day. The survivors packed what little they had and headed south. No one looked back. Daniel never spoke of it again. But sometimes in the dead of winter, when the wind howled just right, he swore he could hear it. A whisper, a voice, soft as the wind. "Let me in." And deep beneath the ice the vampire waited, because winter always comes again, and the north never forgets. The end.